Today's a big day here on BaseCamp Live. For years, listeners have been asking my friend and frequent guest, Keith McCurdy, the same question. Keith, when is your book coming out? Well, after decades of counseling families and helping parents raise resilient, capable kids, it's finally here. Raising Sturdy Kids has arrived. And in this conversation, we celebrate the book's release and we dig into some of its biggest ideas, many of the topics we've talked about for years here on the podcast. We talk about why healthy struggle is one of the greatest gifts we can give our children and how to move them from being a consumer to a contributor, and why it's never too late to strengthen your family's foundations. Whether you're raising toddlers or teenagers or even walking alongside adult children, I think you're going to find this conversation practical and hopeful and deeply encouraging. So without further ado, join us for this episode of BaseCamp Live.
Mountains. We all face them as we seek to influence the next generation. Get equipped to conquer the challenges, summit the peak, and shape exceptionally thoughtful, compassionate, and flourishing human beings. We call it Ancient Future Education for raising the next generation. Welcome to BaseCamp Live. Now your host, Davies Owens.
Welcome to another episode. Davies Owens, your host here on the journey of raising the next generation. What a joy in the last few weeks to be at SCL and ACCS conferences and to get to see so many of you in person. Thanks for so many of you who took the time to walk over and say that you are listening and have been a part of this extended community. And like I said to so many of you, it's so encouraging because podcasting by nature is a fairly one-sided conversation. You speak into a microphone and statistically you can see a lot of people are listening, but to have people chat back is always meaningful. You can do that if you're not at a conference in the old school info@basecamplive.com. What's on your mind, a question, a thought? Always love to hear from you. I'm back on the road in July. I'll be at the CIRSE conference in Charleston and on several other locations throughout the later summer and into the fall. Speaking of travel, one of the things, of course, that I do as well is to visit many of your schools. I've often invited in to speak at parent education events or even teacher training opportunities. I thoroughly love getting out and being with you on your at your various locations and various schools. If you're interested, you can go to the speakers page on the BaseCamp Live website and hear about some of the topics that I often address. Of course, what is classical Christian education is something that is often just an overarching theme here at BaseCamp Live over the last 10 years, as well as just wisdom and insights on how to navigate the modern cultural moment. So all that is on the webpage. Love to hear from you if you're interested in an opportunity for me to be on campus. It would certainly be a blessing to get to do so. As always, I'd like to say a big thank you and shout out to many leaders and schools who are a part of the larger BaseCamp Live and Zipcast community. Julie Corday, head of school at Twin Oaks Christian School in Baldwin, Missouri, as well as to Jonathan Theofil, president of Trinity Christian School in Concord, New Hampshire. Thank you both for being a part of this larger community that we're all a part of in raising up the next generation. This episode, we sit down with Keith McCurdy, who I very frequently tell you he's basically a co-host. If he were a few more times in the month, we could probably officially give him that title. But needless to say, he is a frequent voice because he speaks so accurately on what's happening in our cultural moment and just gives that wisdom that probably grandparents would have said 50 years ago that is so often missing in this very child-centric world that we live in today. Keith McCurdy has worked with families and children and parents and individuals for over 30 years in the field of mental health. He's worked with more than 25,000 individuals and families. He receives his Master of Arts in Education from James Madison University. He's the president and CEO of Total Life Counseling, and he's licensed in the state of Virginia as a licensed professional counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist. This episode is brought to you by the great folks over at the Herzog Foundation, an amazing organization that provides free training to schools all around the country. I also have the privilege of leading their parent engagement workshops that are about 4 to 5 times a year around the country. Big shout out and thanks as well to Robert Littlejohn and Chuck Evans, and their Wisdom and Eloquence for Parenting resource is a book that you'll want to know about. And of course, our own Zipcast. By the way, I was so encouraged at the conferences this summer. I had at the ACCS conference, James Cowart, head of school at Trinitas Classical School in Florida, came up to me and shared the following quote. He said, "We've been with Zipcast since the very beginning, and now we're in our 3rd year. It has been a revolutionary way to communicate with our families, giving us a personal way to connect outside of the normal emails. I love it when someone comes up to me and says, 'Hey, we heard you on Zipcast today.' That personal connection, combined with the outstanding syndicated content, makes Zipcast feel like a parent education tool in a box. We are big fans of Zipcast. Thanks so much, James. I appreciate your encouragement. And as always, folks can learn more at zipcast.media as we're getting schools ramped up now for the fall. And there's limited space again this year. So if you're interested, please reach out to us. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Keith McCurdy. Keith, welcome back to BaseCamp Live.
Oh, thank you for having me back. It's great to be here.
Well, I always say you're a co-host. You just aren't on quite every episode, but when you're here, it's amazing. And this is part of a series we've been doing for a long time.
It has been a long time.
Kind of live story. I know we've been at this for a long time. Do you know what's happening in November of this year, Keith? A little BaseCamp Live trivia.
No, what's happening? How many years?
10 years.
Wow.
10 years, a decade. That was back.
See, I was thinking we've been doing this just a little shy of that.
Yeah, very close to the beginning. I always like to say it was an early, I think it was an ACCS conference when I launched 10 years ago. And this woman, if she's out there, please come tell me, because I quote her all the time, or not even quote her, but she said to me, when she heard about it, she was curious if it was a gardening thing, podcasting. So that's when you know you were early on in the movement, when you were podcasting as a gardening term. But no, lots happened in the last 10 years, including a much anticipated book on your part. Everybody I know that becomes familiar with you, they want to know, where's the book? And you've saying, well, I'm working on it. Well, I'm so excited. Drum roll. The book is out. It's coming out here in the next 30 days or so. And I've had a pre-read of it. It's unbelievable. It's so needed.
Oh, thank you.
And we were just talking before we jumped into this, that, I mean, all the pieces of it, I think, are right for the modern parent. It's not, it's got lots of margin. It doesn't look too intimidating. It's very well organized. You can kind of use it as a handbook. It's got a glossary in it. Talk about the, before we get into the book, just congratulations. What are your thoughts on being at this milestone?
Yeah, no, thank you. I joke with a good friend of mine, Peter Bauer, head of school at Faith Christian, actually soon retiring.
Yes.
And for years, every time I see him, he just says, when you're writing the book, when you're writing the book, when you're writing the book. So the biggest check is I get to tell Peter, number one, stop asking me, and it's finished.
Now you're going to have about 3 months, and it's going to be, Keith, when's the next edition coming, or next volume?
Oh, I'm sure.
Volume 2,
or the workbook. That's
the workbook.
Next,
the workbook. Yeah.
No, it's been a great journey. I mean, it's, you and I have talked about for years, just both of us desiring to provide more resources to parents.
Yeah.
And, several years ago, key folks, you being one of them as well, just nudging me, urging me, fussing at me at times to do a book, to put something physical in the hands of parents. And it really, I tell you, it's a process. There's nothing really easy about it, but I can say it was very joyful. I mean, it really was. It was wonderful to have the interactions with so many folks at Classical Academic Press, just in the editing process, going back and forth, actually initially even brainstorming with Chris Perrin, and just the back and forth of processing, how do we best communicate these ideas that you and I talk about all the time in this format? How do we put them on paper and provide something really that's a tool to parents? That's the goal. And that's what the hope is. The hope is that it actually will be a useful tool to parents and actually a useful tool to schools. I've talked to several schools already that are really taking it and saying, look, we're going to put one of these in the hand of every single parent, because when parents raise their children in this way, then educators get to educate.
Yeah, that's a great.
And that's really what we want. In the classical world, we want students coming in that are primed for this educational environment. And when we raise our children in the fashion that you and I have talked about so many times, really the goal of raising sturdy kids, those are the kids that show up at school and they already have developed self-regulation. They already have budding maturity. They already have the ability to have some patience and sit still and pay attention and ultimately a developing healthy respect for authority figures. And when that's in place, it's amazing how that educational environment can be so much more successful. And that's where we really get true partnering with families signing on that this is how we want our children educated. And we've prepared them to be able to be in this realm and to function well.
And the challenge, of course, that we talk about all the time is, it's never a static process of raising a child. You may actually think things are going pretty well, and then another birthday comes by, and all of a sudden, what happened to that sweet little child I had? And so one of the things I love about the book is a book also provides really kind of basically a field guide, because there may be I don't know how many dozens of interviews we've done, but there are topics that may have been interesting but not necessarily urgent at that moment. But then 6 months later, as a child moves into the next stage or things change in the family, then all of a sudden it's like, how do we deal with this? This wasn't here before. So the book is a really easy grab off the shelf and look it up. I mean, you've got it indexed well, and words are, in there is definitions. So it's, and of course I love the front cover I'm looking at here on my screen, raising sturdy kids. We've all heard that before, but it's this little kid who's clinging onto the side of this giant oak tree, hugging this thing. And it just, that sense of like, little flimsy kid and something sturdy he's holding on to. I love the imagery.
I can do this.
Yeah, I can do this. Put down the roots. And then the subtitle, Simple Truths for Building Strong Families and Capable Kids. So I want to, just think about this book is really for anybody that's involved in raising the next generation. And you consistently talk about, we're at a really interesting point in history, because parents are doing more than they've probably ever done in some ways in terms of being involved in the lives of their children. And yet their children seem probably less equipped for life than they've ever been. You talk in the book, you have this image of building a beautiful boat, but something's missing. Talk about how you set the book up with that image.
Yeah, it's funny. My family, we still have the boat. Actually, my wife and I were just recently talking about, is it time to sell this boat? And it's interesting. Years ago when my kids were in grammar school, they came to me and said, some of the best words a dad can ever hear, Dad, we need a boat. And so, of course, I went to my wife and we talked about a boat and the fact that we were pretty poor. And so we bought a boat that just had myriads of things wrong with it. Had a hole in it, had all kinds of issues, but it was beautiful because we saw the potential in it. And so we worked on this thing for several summers. And I tell you, we gutted it to the bare hull, rebuilt the entire thing. Kids learned all kinds of skills, how to weld, how to rivet, all kinds of things. And had it finally painted, primed, painted, rebuilt, needed one little spot welded. Took it to a buddy of mine who's a welder, and he was walking around thinking, man, I was thinking this thing's beautiful. And I'm feeling probably a little too proud of it. And after a few minutes looking at it and rubbing his hands down it, looking at it, he's like, wow, this thing's gorgeous. Too bad it won't float. And I'm like, what? And what he pointed out to me was there's this very small part that really is the foundation of this form of boat. It's called the knee brace. And it connects the hull of the boat to the transom, or what holds the motor. And it had a hairline crack in it. And he said, yeah, this thing's going to be great until you get out on the water and put it under pressure, and the brace will fail, and the boat motor will fall in the water, and then you will sink. and his commentary was just the reality that it's amazing. You can do so many wonderful things. You can polish things up. You can just put in unbelievable effort at a thing. But if you miss what's foundational, it's all for naught. And that's so much of what hopefully this book is about to parents. It's not about any one child. It really is what should be foundational for all children. So many parents come to see me in my office, and regardless of the issue, the starting point I often come back to is, have you done the foundational things that are required for growth in all children? Because if you haven't, we actually have to step back to that and begin taking care of the foundational pieces, the knee braces that actually hold it all together. Then we can look at the other things that are going on. And it's funny enough that most of the time when we take a moment and really look at what's foundational, developing self-regulation, developing maturity, how we move them from consumer to contributor, so many things you and I have talked about. When we do that, it's amazing how most of the problems parents came in with begin to evaporate. Yeah. Because the problems they were experiencing really weren't unique. They were consequences of a faulty foundation.
Yeah. It's a great image. I'm just still trying to visualize you in the middle of the lake right now with the thing sinking, and
but it hasn't sunk because we fixed it. And to
the point that someone who was a master shipbuilder who was able to say, "Hey, look, this thing looks okay, but there is something inherently flawed in it." And I think that's it is such a great image, because the modern moment is there's probably never been more parenting gurus, experts, books. Right. In fact, somebody's probably saying, gosh, Keith, really? Another book on parenting? I've already got 50 of them, and I've got the YouTube things I watch. So How do you respond? Like, what are you saying that's so inherently different than everybody else that's such a guru of parenting out there?
Yeah, well, number one, that was my hesitancy in writing a book because I hate parenting books. I have read so many parenting books, and I rarely recommend a parenting book to parents. I think what's different is this. If you just look at psychology and culture, there are a lot of good folks in psychology, and psychology has taught us a lot about human behavior and a lot we have learned through psychology, but psychology should not be the head of the ship on this at all. And I'll give you just one example. One of the largest, really, we see today with our teenagers and young adults. It's this idea that we have overinflated the importance of our emotional experience. The idea that how we feel is the most important part of who we are. And that really has just flung us into a world of subjectivism where everything is about how I feel about it. You're offensive because I feel offended. And we see that everywhere in culture. But the bigger piece it does, we have convinced our children and our teenagers and really young adults now that how they feel should be their compass. It should direct them. And yet we know that feelings cannot tell the difference between what is fantasy and what is real. And in my experience, that's a lot of the unwinding I have to do. And that fuels so much. It fuels parents worrying about their children's comfort and safety more than developing character. It fuels individuals worried about whether or not they feel offended or whether they're fearful or anxious about something rather than what's the right thing to do. I mean, that idea that has been pushed by my profession and grabbed onto by culture is just one example. And that infiltrates a lot of the parenting nonsense today. It's whether we call it individualism or humanism, this separation from transcendent truth to my own subjective experience. And I think that's just so many books out there today have that flavor to them. Now, we also have other things historically where with the idea that we can control everything in the life of our child with behaviorism, but we know we can't control a child. Well, at least we know it once we have a child.
No, it's so complicated, especially as we know so many young families don't live near extended family. There's not the generational wisdom that was once there. And so, one of my favorite episodes, if folks haven't heard it, we go back and the one we did on gentle parenting, where I actually kind of played the role of the gentle parent. And you were trying to explain to me why my loving and gracious way of parenting was probably a little bit flawed. And it was done in a way, I think, that really points to the very topic you're bringing up, which is that it's very hard to discern in a world where you think we should, nothing wrong with being a gracious parent and a kind parent. Of course, that's important. But one of the quotes that stood out to me in your book, you asked the question, would you rather your child be ill-equipped later in life or uncomfortable now? And I think that's a great question because so much of modern parenting is about comfort, as you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you think about that, we cannot get to a place where we're equipped without learning to deal with discomfort, without learning to deal with struggle. Parents ask all the time about, they often ask, what's your favorite verse about parenting? And I think that's a funny question. I usually say, if a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. And they go quiet for a minute. Then they laugh. You're kidding, right? And I say, well, the verse in Scripture that really directs us in parenting is, at least the process of growth, is in the beginning of the book of James, where in essence we hear that it's actually struggle and persevering in struggle that develops growth and maturity. Yeah. So it's the exactly opposite of so much of what we do today and try to keep everyone comfortable.
Yeah. Well, and it's such it's a very tempting thing to want to do. And, living sturdy can be tough, but again, there's a ultimately, and that's what we're aiming for when they leave and there's they're living out their lives. That's the fruit. That's the joy of it. And I know that's a lot of what you're having to do is sort of often kind of remediate where things weren't done right and children have come off the rails and you're able to pull them back on. And there's a lot of redemptive work that can be done, but it's sure easier if you can kind of get it right from the beginning. So this is a great, so this maybe to that point, and then we'll take a break. So who is this book for? The brand new parent, the parent with the prodigal child? I mean, is everybody going to benefit from it equally? What's your thoughts?
I think so. I mean, as I deal with parents across all of children of all ages, because the principles in the book, I would argue, are very foundational, they're applicable to all ages.
Yeah.
Of course, I would love for parents of new babies to read this, because the active role of onboarding our children to life, that age is right around the age of 2. So the earlier we get foundational things, and of course, the better. But so many things in this book, I think, as you saw, really are geared towards whether it's children or adolescents or older teenagers or young adult children. So I think it's applicable across the board because we're talking about foundational processes for those children.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take a break. This is this conversation is very much about just announcing the book and all that. But we do, as you're listening, there will be some really good tips and encouragements and pieces of golden wisdom in here that will be in this podcast as well that will point to the book because it has so much in it. But I want to come back to some of those just continued points of encouragement that you offer in the book. And so stick around. We'll be right back after the break. During this short break, I have a special invitation to all school leaders, administrators, and teachers. I want you to imagine for a moment stepping away from your everyday routine at school and diving deep into the rich foundations of Christian education, surrounded by world-class scholars, seasoned classroom teachers, and administrative experts with years of experience running schools with a lot of wisdom to share. That's exactly what the Herzog Foundation's Institute is offering. I've had the joy of serving as a training coach for the last few years, leading their 2.5-day training on spiritual formation and another one on parent engagement. They offer close to 50 unique training events ranging from board governance to marketing to classroom best practices. They even offer a training on how to teach the great books. And the best part of all, well, thanks to the generosity of the Herzog Foundation, these training events, including lodging, are completely free for Christian educators. Institutes are located around the country in beautiful locations, including at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and the Reagan Library in Santa Barbara. Don't miss this incredible opportunity. Check out the details at theherzogfoundation.com. If you're seeking an education that helps your child thrive academically and spiritually, Wilson Hill Academy has spent years developing a model that I want you to know about. In their free guide, you'll see how their thoughtfully sequenced curriculum prepares students for college and how a biblical worldview helps them understand the world around them with clarity, and how their discussion-based classes teach them to think critically, not just what to think. You'll also discover how their teachers equip students to live purposefully for Christ. With accredited live online classes, your child can learn from master teachers anywhere with an internet connection, all within a community that has transformed families like yours. Download their free guide today at wilsonhillacademy.com/guide or in the link in our show notes. Keith, I love the fact that the book, again, is very much a handbook, and there's lots of different topics depending on particular issues that maybe a person's facing in their parenting, or maybe even as an educator dealing with students in the classroom. But there are obviously some central ideas of the book. The quote that comes to my mind is where you say, healthy struggle is one of the ordinary ways children grow. Would you say that's the central theme, or are there other themes along those lines?
Well, I think that is a central theme. It's the idea that growth, if we want to grow our children, then we have to allow them, and at times even instigate, struggle in their life. And then the very simple way, and I think this is echoed through the book, is by onboarding them to obligation. Very simply, and I think I talk about this in the book, the idea of our identity. Mm-hmm. How do we form our identity? What is our identity? And we get this wonderful little teeny passage. I think it's in the book of Mark, where the disciples are coming to Jesus and they're walking along the road, and this is where they're fussing about who's the greatest. Mm-hmm. They're talking about basically, they're having an identity conversation, and it makes sense if you look at history. The belief is many of the disciples were still older teenagers, and so it sounds like a male teenage conversation. I'm better than you, you're better than me, blah blah blah. So they get to Jesus, and he confronts them, and just says, "What were you guys talking about?" Of course, he knew, and they get quiet. They sit down, and he says, if you want to be first, you must be last and servant to all. So they're having an identity conversation about what it is to be great, what it is to be the best. And his simple response is, well, it's really about service. And so when you think about that, he gave them the answer to identity, to understanding who they are, who God called them to be, and how he called them to live. And our job is, as soon as our children begin demonstrating functional ability, which is at the age of 2, is to begin onboarding them to service. And that process moves them from being self-centered to selfless.
Yeah.
And it also moves them, how do we do that? Moving them from consumer to contributor. And that's the journey of the next 10, 15 years in our home, is that process of us helping our children learn to struggle with what I call burdens, obligations, chores, responsibilities, and help them learn to struggle with those well, to develop that selflessness and also that contributor mindset. One of the analogies in the book I give is I lived on a sailboat for a while with some scouts, and really the analogy of, are we raising cruise passengers or crew? Mm. And too many times, and cruises are great, but they're not real life. But too many times we're raising cruise passengers when really we need to be equipping them to run the boat. And those that learn actually how to navigate life most successfully, the ins and outs, and manage them well, are by far the ones that have the highest degrees of peace in life, joy in life, a sense of flourishing in life. You know, one of the things that as we onboard our kids, if we think about it, two things to really master. The first is self-regulation, and it's part of this process, which is the ability to do as I'm told, the ability to do as I'm expected when I don't feel like it, when I don't want to. And that, you know, some people say to me, you know, how do you define kindergarten readiness? Well, that's how I define it. You have a child that's learned self-regulation, the ability to follow instructions when I don't want to. Yeah. That then builds to later in life, the ability for that individual to choose what is right, to pursue what is right when it's difficult or uncomfortable. Those two key skill sets develop through struggle, develop through obligation, develop through service. And so I would say a core theme of the book is how that applies to the growing of our children. Yeah. And we talk about many ways to begin doing that in our family.
Well, again, I think that there's so much of an encouraging vision that you're casting. So it's very easy to just hear struggle, and people already think, I'm already exhausted, I'm already struggling, and now I've got to have my. So the goal here is not to focus on the struggle or the discomfort. It is to focus on the fruit that will be born from that. And, you know, I think about like in your cruise ship analogy, I mean, sure, for a couple months, it'd be amazing to be on a cruise ship, but after a while, and people, not that I've been on it for a couple of months, but you kind of like, okay, I'm kind of over the food. I'm kind of over the thing. I'm just done. Like I'm kind of sick and bored with it all. I mean, it wouldn't be fun after a while, but if you were in a world where you were serving and you were doing good and you're outside of yourself, you could do that for years and for a lifetime. Yeah. And so I think that's a really important part of the book, is that it's not just come grit your teeth and raise little gritty kids that are miserable all the time. It's actually joyful, it becomes part of your nature.
Well, and some of the references even in the book are with adults who have, you know, come in for help, and really they had to confront that they were never, they were not operating in a way that was serving anybody else. And that transformation in their life of them moving from consumer to contributor to really doing something to the benefit of others is what freed them from their depression, freed them from their anxiety. And it doesn't mean it wasn't hard and it wasn't difficult at different times, but it was a different process that gave them hope rather than just slogging away with another medication or another therapy or something else. It was actually, wait a minute, maybe I'm called to something higher. Yeah. And it's funny because early on, the feedback I get from parents, and this is it's tens of thousands of parents, that when they begin turning more life over, responsibility, obligation to their children, two things change. One, after the first couple of weeks, it's actually out of their mouths. It's actually easier than we thought it would be. And two, our children now are actually getting more freedom and privilege. Number one, they're earning it. Number two, we want to give it to them because we see them contributing in life. It's almost the mechanism starts to make sense that, wow, when our children begin serving, responsibility and obligation lead to freedom and privilege.
Which is such a great, again, don't we want that for our children? I mean, who wants their children to, be discouraged and incapable of pressing through and not having maturity? I mean, we say we want these things, but they're really obtainable, and they're obtainable even if you didn't do it right for the first 5-10 years or whatever. And now there's a way to get the train back on the track. You talk in the book about this image of stressed wood. Is that part of the vision here?
Yeah, I mean, stress wood is in the world of plants and trees. Mm-hmm. It's the idea that you need a tree to be exposed to the pressures of the wind and the weather and all of that sort of stuff. And it develops a flexibility and a strength then to weather more of those things, more of those pressures in life. And when you stake a tree too long and you forget to take the stakes off after the roots are really started to grow, then you can never take the stake off or the tree can't survive. And too many times that's what we have in parenting today is we move from caretaking to our children later in life to just keeping them comfortable and meeting all their needs. And even as they're young adults and in their 20s and 30s, they get married and we're still funding everything and taking care of everything. I mean, we see that around us. I see it everywhere. But it's the idea of by doing this, we actually give our children freedom to engage the world. That's
a great image of the tree. I was thinking as you started saying that, like a really uncomfortable three-legged race, which is kind of fun for a while. But if mom or dad's like literally strapped to your ankle as a young adult, that would get really old.
That would get really old.
Really incapacitate. You're like, mom is always here. And maybe that's good. Yeah. Of course, that's not what we want either as adults. So and you say in there, I love the quote, we're not merely raising children, but future adults. Like we actually want them to be able to bend in the wind and operate independently. Again, isn't that what we all want?
Years ago, the title of kind of this process I've worked on forever was originally Raising Sturdy Adults. And I think it was my wife or one of my kids is like, okay, nobody's going to pay attention to that. I'm like, I know, but that's the goal. They're like, it has to be kids. Well, okay. Yeah. Even though the goal is raising sturdy adults.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. It's a great way to think of that because you want to, again, it's never too late, but it's sure a lot easier when they're in the kid state. So,
well, that's what hopefully folks will pick up when they read this. This is not a, you've missed the boat and done it wrong type of book. That's definitely not the message. I meet parents and deal with parents at every stage of raising children. I even meet parents dealing with adult children wanting to rebuild relationship and reconcile and repair things from the past. And what I tell parents all the time, they say, is it too late? I say, well, are they still breathing? I mean, it's not too late. We have an unbelievable capacity for change.
Which is such good news. Yeah.
And no one does it perfectly. Every parent I have ever met, myself included, we have made mistakes along the way, and we will continue to make mistakes. The difference is, are we at least pointed in the right direction? Or are we using the right tools, even if mistakes are made?
And I think that's to that point. I want to take a break. I'm going to set up a question, and you come back and answer it afterwards. Sure. But we've talked at various points just about since you and I are often both blessed with the opportunity to speak at schools and speak to parent groups, and and so often you get there and the numbers aren't maybe what the school had hoped for, and despite really good promotion. And kind of one of our working theories has always been that there's some number of parents, I think, if they're really honest, that will say, that Keith guy's coming. I know what he's going to tell me is right, and I'm just going to sit here and feel horrible because it's just let me go beat myself up and remind myself of what I didn't do right. And that is a real that parent guilt. You talk about mom guilt and FOMO, and I want to hear your thoughts, or just some encouragement there, because it's real easy to think, well, I don't want to go buy a whole book and be reminded of what I haven't done right. I mean, that would be an understandable sentiment, especially because we all are very aware of our foibles and failures as parents. But there is good news. So let's take a break and we'll come back and hear the good news.
Hi there, classical Christian parents, students, and teachers. This is Robert Littlejohn, co-author with Charles Evans of Wisdom and Eloquence, a Christian paradigm for classical learning, published by Crossway Books. We want you to know about our new book with well-known family counselor Keith McCurdy, published by Classical Academic Press. The book is titled Wisdom and Eloquence for Parents: How Classical Christian Education Can Transform Your Children, Your Family, and the World. We have written this shorter, parent-focused book specifically as an admissions and parent education resource for schools and families. We are excited to be proud sponsors of Sipcast and BaseCamp Live, and we hope you are enjoying these two great resources for classical learning as much as we are. And we would invite you to visit our website, wisdomandeloquence.org, to explore the various services offered by the authors of Wisdom and Eloquence for Parents, and to let us know how we can best serve you. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
Every school year tells a story. Some chapters are easy to see, like the first day of class or graduation at the end. But the real heart of a story is often written in the quieter pages. A science experiment that sparks wonder, the decision to slow down and memorize a psalm, the way a teacher walks alongside a student who's struggling. Those are the moments parents long to understand. They spark questions like, how do I nurture that same sense of wonder at home? What simple rhythms can make God's word a part of our family's everyday routine? How do I encourage perseverance in my child when the work gets hard? Zipcast helps schools bring those quieter pages to light. Each week, families receive a short 10 to 12 minute episode that pairs local updates from their own school leaders with syndicated insights from trusted national experts in both Christian parenting and education. Parents can easily listen anywhere on the go, on the drive to practice, while cooking dinner, or during a quiet walk. It's not another notice in an inbox, it's a voice that brings encouragement, clarity, and perspective. And in every episode, parents not only hear what's happening at their school and why it matters, but also gain practical wisdom that connects the school story to the home. Nearly 100 schools are already using Zipcast this year, and beginning in the fall or winter isn't too late. It can actually be the best time to start. If you're a school leader, your school's story deserves to be clearly heard. Visit zipcast.media to learn more.
Keith, the challenge of parenting is that we never do it perfectly, and there's no perfect parent. So everyone's in the same boat. And it's real easy, I think, especially if you're that young, starry-eyed young parent, and you've got that firstborn, and so far everything's perfect, and you feel great about it, and then all of a sudden you realize when the second one comes along, or maybe even the first one gets another month older, that I've dropped the ball a lot. And I think it's very normal in our kind of performance, competitive-oriented world to look at ourselves and think, the last thing I want to do is go read a book that's going to tell me what I've probably not done right, or I've missed the boat, and now I'm just feeling ashamed of myself. What words of encouragement do you have to parents as they think about reading these resources in your book and other parenting resources that you've provided and not feeling that way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, number one, I would never want to write a book that made somebody feel bad. That is something that's been in the background with any of the things you and I have done before, and definitely this book, that it's really not about, hey, look, here's where you messed up. I would argue it's a whole lot more about, hey, we've all messed this up. No one will ever do it perfectly. Even early on in the book, we talk a lot about parent guilt, and the fact that actually my industry plays into that, unfortunately, in a very problematic way. And I refer to children as little criminals. And the reason I do that is because they all lie, cheat, and steal. At some point, that's why they need to be trained. And most of the things that we see with our young children that are problematic behaviors are completely normal, maybe not appropriate. We don't like them and we want to shape them. Completely normal for those kids. It's not a result of our parenting. The notion that we can actually design and we fully create this child, that is a myth. We don't. They're a mix of all kinds of things. Our job is to train them, to guide them, to direct them. So our children are messy. Parenting is messy. We are all going to struggle with it. The goal in the book, and really everything that I do, is, here are the things to help you along the path. Don't worry so much about your history. Let's start where we are here and move forward. And that's the focus, I think, of the book is, look at where you are. One of the things I ask at the end of the intro, I put a couple questions at the end of each chapter. Mm-hmm. And one of them is just, take a moment, list the things you struggle with your children. And then as you read the book, reflect back on the list to see if you heard anything that can be useful in that process. Because the focus is, what do we do with where we are right now and move forward? It's not about, let's beat up on what we've messed up, because we've all messed up. A principle that, or a process I work with, and most of what I do is, can we accurately identify the problem? Can we accurately identify the problem in a way that we all understand it? Can we then accurately identify the principles that should speak to that problem? And then can we identify some practical application based on those principles? That's hopefully what the book is. It's looking at the problems. Why do we struggle culturally? All of us, every one of us. What's common to our struggle? What are the principles that really should speak to it? Not my profession, not psychology or culture. What is transcendent that should speak to it? And then what are some simple ways of application? I'll tell you a funny story. Through the process of the book being edited and proofed, one of the folks that's running all of this sent me a note, and she said the proofer said, she got done proofing the book, which meant reading the book. And she said, this already works with my daughter. I've already implemented several things. And I encouraged my daughter that she could pull weeds, and it wasn't that big a deal. Now my daughter loves pulling weeds that she could push through.
Yeah.
Just that message that our children are built to be so much more capable than we see them today. And so again, it's not about how have you failed in this? It's, hey, where can you start right where you are and move forward? Same thing when I come to schools. When I come to schools and speak, the goal is let's identify the mess we're all in a sense, and what are some key things we can do moving forward wherever we're beginning.
Well, and I think that's that idea of potential, of hope. I mean, just as humans, we want to know that there is something, there's something glorious. We talk about this word flourishing quite often in our Christian world, in our classical Christian world. And it's a good word. And I think that these things are not just for the perfect kids down the street. I mean, we all want, Chris Perrin writes in this forward, we want our sons and daughters to become responsible, capable, faithful, courageous, and wise. Like, yes, I mean, we want that. Those are not unobtainable goals. Right. And sometimes they have to come in little piecemeal steps, and sometimes you don't see it for a long time. But this is important, I think, to keep in mind.
Well, yeah. And I define in the book, the way I look at flourishing and is defined this way: correctly ordered and oriented relationships. When I read scripture, God puts in place relationships, relationship to him, relationship to creation, relationship to our spouse, relationship to our kids, relationship to mankind. Everything's in a relationship. And so it's the process of learning to serve in all of those relationships that gives us the moments to teach virtue and wisdom. Give us the moments to teach all of these lessons to our children. And when we have that notion of service and we're onboarding our children, I mean, so much of it is about how do we correctly orient ourselves to this person? How do I serve my wife? How do I serve God? How do I serve my sibling when I want to kill them? Because I usually do. How do I serve my neighbor? All of this gives the entry point to parents, because so many times parents will come to me and say, yeah, we know this is what we want to raise our children, the direction we want to go. How do we do it? Mm-hmm. What do we need to teach them? What curriculum do we need to follow? What book do we need to read to them at night? And I said, well, actually, no, I think you need to think more of how can we onboard them to being contributors in the kingdom?
Yeah.
And by doing that, we open up the avenue for flourishing as correctly ordered and oriented relationships. And I think that's where we develop that process of serving in all of those roles, being selfless rather than self-centered or self-focused, is what opens us up to understanding virtue, understanding wisdom. I think about the idea of the virtues, and ultimately maturity captures the core of courage, which is the application of every virtue. It's that notion of I know the right thing to do, but I don't want to. I don't feel like it. It's not cool. People make fun of me for it. But I have the courage to apply the virtue that connects in this moment.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to raise, those children that are courageous, that can operate correctly in that moment.
And that idea of just that little rubric or that slogan or saying, from being a consumer to being a contributor. I mean, it just you almost use that as I hear you say, it's like, just take that, if that's all you've got, take that with you right now as a kind of a little ruler to put over this situation and go, is this action leading them towards just consuming? Like back to the young woman pulling weeds. It's like, this is something that you just shifted to becoming a contributor. And that was a different outcome, which is the outcome you want. So I think these are, again, what I so appreciate about the book is it's not heavy philosophy. It's just really practical, obtainable wisdom that anybody can start implementing. And to your point, a lot of these things are even convicting to us as adults. And I know you see that where it's kind of the point one finger forward and all four fingers are back at us going, I probably need to be more like that. I need to serve more. Yeah.
I think of the world in which I exist with all of this, what I teach, how I deal with families. I still have to confront, I don't feel like doing this. But it's still the right thing I need to do today, or it's still the appropriate thing, or it's still how I serve my wife, or how I serve my adult children, or how I serve God, even though I don't feel like it. Yeah. And it's constantly putting our feelings as a tool, not a guide.
Yeah. And that's another one of those. And maybe we've talked about creating the T-shirt collection. We may do that someday. But from consumer to contributor, that'd be on the T-shirt. Probably
red-headed ostriches.
Join the red-headed ostrich campaign, because we're all weird together. But, we're doing something that's different. We got to acknowledge that. And that's probably a really good point to end on, that we are increasingly a group of countercultural crazy parents and educators. We're not doing what the mainstream world tells you to do. And I think we just have to get over that, because we know where this is going, and it's worth the headache of being the only, family at the birthday party who doesn't do X, Y, and Z with their kids. Because
right. Exactly. Well, I mean, there is a simple truth that there was a time in this country where culture lined up reasonably well with morality.
Yeah.
But that is long past.
That's long past.
And so using culture or culturally infused things to drive how we parent is a mistake. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, much of my profession does great things, but it should never have the mantle of parenting expert. That is not what psychology does well.
No, not when so much of it is based in good behaviorism or Freudianism and our other, problems that the modern world has said it is about ultimately protecting one's personal choices and identity and all of the really narcissistic orientation of one's humanness, which is not what we're about. We're about giving ourselves, you're giving yourself away. And that's a totally countercultural perspective. Yeah.
Right. So, exactly.
Well, Keith, as always, we could go on, and we will keep going on because there's more Live Sturdy series that we'll be doing together. And we'll definitely talk more about the book. If folks want to get a copy, I know right now as we're recording this, it's not actually fully available yet, but coming extremely soon this summer. Where will it be available?
Yeah, that's what we're figuring out right now. No, I know. It's Classical Academic Press.
Sure.
If you go to their site, right now it's available to pre-order.
Okay.
And I'm sure, Davies, you and I can figure out some fancy way to create a QR code that'll take them there, and you can put it in show notes.
We may even have to create some a little BaseCamp Live discount at some point. We've got some, even give away some books. I got all kinds of ideas here.
Yeah, so folks, love to do something like that. But right now through Classical Academic Press, if you go to their site, it's already on their site for pre-order.
Great.
And if you're a school listening, you're probably within a day or two going to get an email from me about how to do that for schools to bulk buy.
Great.
And if you don't get an email, then reach out to Chris Perrin and the folks there, and they'll tell you how to do it.
I bet you can probably even find it on Amazon eventually. What do you think?
I hope it's everywhere.
Yeah, I hope it's everywhere. Yeah.
I'm waiting for the time that I think it was my daughter that said this. Oh, I forget who it was. It could have been my wife. That I'm sitting on a plane going somewhere and somebody's reading the book.
Yeah. You go, what is that?
Hey, how do you like that book?
Crazy guy. Right. No, I have grand expectations that will happen. And I'm excited too to work with you on some Zipcast segments because this book, literally these 11 chapters make perfect little 2-minute segments for schools to be able to use. So there's so many ways I know God will use this great work and this message that's the goal. That needs to get out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the goal is, the prayer is, it's a tool for schools, for parents.
Yep.
To better wrestle with what we all wrestle with in raising our kids.
Yeah. Well, Keith, thanks for taking the time to write the book. I know that it's going to be very valuable and very loved by many. So, and maybe you'll even have autographed copies someday. That would be even more amazing. So,
oh no. Well, thanks for having me on to talk.
All right,
about
Keith.
it.
It's always great chatting with you. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of BaseCamp Live. Be sure to check out our website, basecamplive.com, for more than 8 years of timeless episodes that you'll find helpful and encouraging, as well as the helpful resources offered on our partners page. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of our partners like the Herzog Foundation. See you back next week.